Welcome back. Got some new projects. I haven't been filming a lot of the stuff that's been going on lately, but I'm going to start resolving that a little bit. So today we're doing a Shou Sugi Ban. Which site you're going to? Shou Sugi Ban appears to be a mistranslation, but it's also in common use. So hey, Shou Sugi Ban it is. Shou Sugi Ban is the process of taking wood and burning it or scorching it, so with a light or a deep char, which will allow you to protect, preserve, and control infestation from insects, fungi, molds, and all around seal up the wood as best you can. Now, obviously, every time you cut the wood, we'll be removing the char, but I'm going to try and plan this out as best I can so that when it's standing in place, I'll be able to char some of these in place right over the screw holes and use best practices where we can for this deck. Now, this deck is not elevated, so some of our wood's going to be in ground contact over its entire length. Now, for the eagle-eyed viewers, in the background, we've got two boards that are already done. As you can hear, since I've started filming this, the neighbors have fired up their ATV and are running around the neighborhood as fast as they possibly can, which they seem to be enjoying doing the last couple of weeks. And my neighbor directly to the south of me has brought his bandsaw out of his shop and is now running that to cut firewood, apparently. So please excuse the background noise. So we are going to be taking these 4x4x8 kiln dried Douglas firs, and right now we're at about various moisture contents between 9 and 11% tested on a semi-reliable probe tester that I have in the shop. And we're going to start by scorching the ends to get a good char on those. And then normally I would go down the skinny side, the 1.5 inch on your standard 2x material. Scorch that first, or char that first, and then get overlapping char onto that as you flip over from one side to another. Then after that process is finished, the wood is extremely dry, ready to absorb something immediately. So we'll take these boards directly over to that rack right there, where we will be putting linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, on it as a surface treatment. Now, I have seen people using heated 50-50 turpentine and linseed oil. I have not tried that yet. On one of the projects upcoming, we may try that and then do a far off exposure to the weather comparison, maybe sometime next fall, to see how they hold up against each other. So let's take a look at our boards here. We've got fairly wide rings on two of these boards, decently tight rings on this one, and decently tight rings on this one. So I have one location on this deck that's going to get a lot more water than the other locations, as it's near a area where a downspout used to be and will be installed back again. So the plan is to take this guy with his relatively tight growth, and he will be in that one spot. Now the rest of the deck is either in the sun or fairly far away from a continuous water source. So even just 12 feet away, there's a peak on that side that does not slope towards that area. It takes the water to another portion of the yard. So we're going to take these, and we'll be using this, I believe this brand is Max Blaze. I will flip this over and check. Blaze Torch MT455. And I'll see if I can leave a link down below. It's not self-igniting. It uses a sparker. For those of you who are concerned about getting your hands close to the flame, that might be a little concerning. This is a short striker, much like you would use with an oxy torch or MAP gas or propane torch that's not self-igniting. And it works by this spring being compressed with a piece of flint inside there that sparks whenever it is moved from one side to the other under pressure. So quick spark should ignite your propane as it comes out from the tank. This attaches to a standard barbecue tank with an adapter here on the side. Now this does not have any gas thread tape. There's an O-ring down inside here that this was screwed in with in the reverse direction. So this is lefty-tighty, righty-loosey for those of you who might be considering this and wondering why it's not going in. But on this end of the hose, we do have thread tape because there is no O-ring here. This is simply brass to brass, and we don't want any leaks. And then we have a gas control here, on and off. It is marked. It's kind of hard to see there. And then we have an arrestor. I'm assuming this is the base for this pin that passes through, so I don't think a spark arrestor would work with this assembly, but I could be wrong. And then a fairly comfortable grip, 36-inch head. And this pulls air in from this side through, I believe, Venturi effect, and brings it out this side where you can already see I've got some debris building up from getting a little too close to the wood. Now this puts out some serious heat. So just a heads up to anyone who is doing this, you need to back off from this flame, because if you have any sort of breeze whatsoever, it may not be a flame that will be reaching you. It may just be the superheated air, and it is hot. Obviously, most of us have experience with fire, and we know what hot means. If you don't know what hot means, I wouldn't recommend this project for you just yet. Might have a little bit more research to do. So, as you can see, these have got tags. They had some other tags and things stuck on them that I'd already removed. There's some chalk down there that someone had marked these with. These possibly are returns. And I'm curious, not concerned, as to what will happen when this chalk is torched. Actually, a closer inspection, that might be paint pen. I'm not sure. It smells like chalk. So I'm doing this on a steel structure, back of a trailer here. Yes, I'm aware that decking is flammable, but having done this several times already, as you can see, there is no scorching. And if you are concerned about what you're doing for your surface, you can always pre-wet your surface underneath. So we will take this, set this off to the side, and we'll just get that old gross trailer. So we did get that board slightly wet, or rather I did, not you did. And now we'll move on to the heating phase. So I'm going to set this on one of the boards, and I will start with that board instead of starting from the end so that you can watch the charring actually happen. So the first thing we'll do with this torch setup is take the tank and turn the main valve on the tank on. You'll hear your line pressurize. Then we'll take the torch and turn it in the direction of on. As you do, you'll start to hear gas coming out. Now, this lever right here releases far more propane, and you'll hear that. So, we now have gas flowing. We will take the striker. There we go. However, if you press that lever, you get a lot more power. Now this is going to be a little hard to hear me over, so I'm going to stop talking at this point and just get to it. I'm going to turn up the gas slightly, and you can watch what happens. Now that was in real time, not an accelerated fast forward speed. So you can see that this does not take long to do this process. So I will do the next one. And that is the general gist. So let's just shut down this burner for a second and take a closer look here. So the wood, having growth rings, has different types of cellulosic material in this. Now the rings themselves, if we look at a section here that's not burned, the darker sections are considerably harder. They're much denser. They have less water space, less open area even after they're dried. And as this gets damp and expands and contracts, the lines you're seeing, the dark lines, expand and contract far less than the cellulosic material in between. So when this expands and contracts, when it's unprotected, this will expand with water and then retract or compress itself as the water vapor leaves it. So by scorching this, you can see when we get down close, it forms rather valleys of that material where it is burned away and the ridges remain scorched. So we have a char layer down in that is basically a protectant for that material. Now the knots work differently. The knots are made out of slightly different material yet again than either of those two, and they're significantly harder. So of the wood, the hardest, tightest material is the knots. However, when they shrink, sometimes those knots fall out. So these have been chosen for, to the best of my ability, knots that don't penetrate all the way through the log, or the 4x4, as this case would be. So I'm going to set you up and we'll get the rest of these torched and we'll take a look at the final result. All right, so there is our charred 4x4s for us posts. Now these ends over here are going to be going back into the ground. We have here in Missouri a karst topography. We have limestone, chert, shales, but mostly limestones, and clay soils in a lot of areas that drain away water very effectively most of the time. What I'm going to be doing with these is something that I've meant to try with a few others, and that is to have my gravel drainage base underneath my posts where they come down, but then to take several inches of dirt and pack it tightly a few inches up, and then pour my concrete above that as an attempt for having an escape route for water to leave. Now, water and wood actually mix really well, as long as they stay in one state or another. If they stay completely dry and there's no water involved, your wood is great. If you have water on the wood all the time and it stays submerged, great. But it's the coming and going of water on an unprotected surface that allows the fungi and organisms that digest the wood to grow and multiply. And just a side note, for those who are asking, why on earth are you not using cedar for this? The budget for this was not cedar. The budget for this was not whitewood either. It was kiln dried Douglas fir for this project. I've got one kind of wonky board here, but the rest all looks pretty good. And possibly on the next project, maybe something a little more upscale as far as wood products are. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to burn the bottom 2 feet or so. Well, actually, all things considered, right at 2 feet. Yeah, 2 feet of this much darker char. So I will be back. So we're back again. We have a much heavier char on this end than on that side. As it turns out, with that mark in question, it didn't do much. This will be underground, so I'm not too concerned about it. The look of the posts looks pretty nice. So now I'm going to take them over here in the sun and do some oiling. So here we have a close-up of the 2x8x10s that will make the outside portions of the deck, which will be at least partially in contact with the soil. Now underneath there's going to be gravel, and these will have a clearance of probably about 3 inches. But over time those gaps are very likely to get filled in along the deck, and the char and the linseed oil should help prevent what in our area most commonly is fungal decay. Could happen that we'd get termites, not likely, but it might. So over here we have an oiled 4x4 that we just burned and an unoiled 4x4. And backing up, the sun is quite strong today. You can see that the one on the right is shinier, darker, it's been oiled. But the first application is sucked away extremely quickly due to the dryness of the wood. So let's put some oil just directly on it. And then wipe that in. And watch how fast that gets sucked into the wood. Makes my heart happy. But it might be a shade dark. So I think the decking is going to need to be just a little bit less char than this. Not much, a lot less than that, but a little bit less than this. Or maybe I will sand it before installing. So here we have completed our char on these. Now, as a logical question, well, what about the tops? What are we going to do about the tops? Well, one of two things. Depending on how tall the railing ends up being, I may just leave it alone and put possibly a pergola top over the top of this at a later date. If not, I will cut it in place and then probably put a heat shield behind it and re-torch it with the blaze torch. Get a nice char back on it. Now these are already cut to length and are the appropriate size. So the only thing to retorch on this will be my screw holes where they go through, and that should be pretty easy as they'll be at the outside edges. So that's it for this part of a Shou Sugi Ban deck. Thanks for watching.